Today is June the 16th, 2004, and this is the beginning of an interview with John Cox at the Winchester City Hall in Winchester, Kentucky. Mr. Cox is 82 years old, having been born on October 11th, 1921. My name is Richard Dowdy, and I will be the interviewer. Don Rose is running the camera and keeping the log. Mr. Cox, would you state what branch of service you were in?
I was in the United States Army Air Corps.
What was the highest rank that you held?
Staff Sergeant.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted. I was in college at the time.
Okay. What college were you attending at the time?
UK.
Okay. Under what kind of degree?
I was taking pre-law at that time, and after the war I went back and finished and got my law degree.
When you were drafted, you pretty well went right on in, right?
Yeah, my age put me right in the first draft call, and I had discussed it with my father, and he had agreed that it'd be all right for me to go in the Air Force after I finished that semester. But in the meantime, since I was in the first call, I had already got my invitation from Uncle Sam.
And what year was this?
This was in 1942.
And this was during World War II?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Where were you living at the time?
At that time, I was living at Pine Ridge, Kentucky. That's in Wolfe County.
And what you say you were going to school. Do you remember your first day in the service?
Yes, sir, I do. I believe there was 3 busloads of us left Campton that day, and we went to Fort Thomas. Was our induction center, and just before I left, the banker, Rush Evans, came down and talked to me. He had been in World War I with my uncle, and he said as I was getting on the bus, "Could I give you a little advice?" And I said, I would be tickled to death. He said, "Keep your ears and your eyes and your bowels open, your mouth shut. Don't volunteer for nothing." Of course, I volunteered to fly, and I don't regret that at all. But I saw what Rush was talking about on the first afternoon that they fell us out at the induction center. They asked how many people had driver's license. Several of them stuck up their hands and volunteered. They said, "Okay, get those wheelbars over there and police up the area." And I knew what Rush was talking about then, that he was giving me good advice.
Okay. Why did you pick you weren't really in the Air Force, you was in the Army Air Corps, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Army Air Force.
Why did you pick the Air?
I suppose there wasn't an airport within 75 miles, I don't guess, but I started reading about the English Air Force, the German Air Force, and our Air Force during World War I, and I just got interested. I said, that's what I want, the Air Force.
After you left Fort Thomas, where did you go?
I was sent to St. Petersburg, Florida for basic training. And we took our basic at St. Petersburg, and then in the fall of that year, I had taken aptitude tests, and I wanted to be a radio operator, so they sent me to radio and mechanics school, radio operators and mechanics school in Chicago, Illinois. And my best buddy, who was from my hometown, was so good at code that they made him stay there a year to teach, and he was awful disappointed that he didn't get overseas till a year after his class did.
Can you remember anything about your basic training besides that?
Yeah, I can remember that we had long hikes, and we would swim. We would swim in the bay every once in a while. And I remember one day, practically all of us boys were from the Midlands of America. We weren't very acquainted with the oceans or the seas. I remember one day we were out there swimming we saw these fins coming in, and we all jumped out of the water and run, you know, and the instructor was trying to tell us, boys, they won't hurt you, they're just porpoise, they're not sharks. But nevertheless, the bay was emptied in record time. We wasn't about to wait to find out if they were porpoise or sharks.
So you had some pretty good instructors then?
Yes.
They taught you pretty well?
Basically, I was pretty well satisfied with my instructors in the service. It made it somewhat easier, I guess, for me in basic training that I had 2 years of ROTC training at the University of Kentucky.
How long did you stay there?
Sir?
How long were you there?
In
basic training.
Basic training? I think it was December. We went there immediately from the induction center, and I believe it was late November, early December that we shipped out to radio school, and we were there in the interim all that time.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask you, Nick. Where did you go after that? Radio school? Where was that?
Radio school at Chicago.
Chicago. And how long did you stay there?
I stayed there until the summer of 1943. I think that we left there about in June of 1943. And from there, I went to what they called Overseas Training School at Atlantic City, New Jersey. After staying there some 6 weeks, we were sent to Fort Dix, where we embarked for Scotland. There was a staging area in Scotland, and we went over, the group I was with went over in the Queen Elizabeth, which was probably the largest ship in the world at that time. It was a converted luxury liner, of course.
How were the accommodations on it? Pretty tight?
Pretty tight. They had bunks about 3 or 4 high all across. I imagine that there was between 12 and 15,000 troops on that one ship at that one time that I went over.
Okay, after you got overseas, where were you assigned to?
We were sent to a staging area we landed at a staging area in Scotland near Dublin, and I guess it was about 4 or 5 weeks later that I was told that I was to be assigned to the 94th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, and at that time I was taken to Bury St. Edmund, England, by train.
What kind of planes did you fly in?
The B-17, which was the Boeing B-17, which was that with the B-24s were the heavy bombers used in England. They never, and in the European theater. The B-29 never did get to the ETO. They were used exclusively in the Pacific theater.
How many missions did you fly?
I was shot down on my 7th.
On your 7th. Okay. What was it like to be shot down? What happened?
Well, the day we were shot down, it was quite a bad day. It was January the 11th, 1944. We were going to bomb a fighter plane factory near Berlin. The Germans thought that we were going to hit Berlin, which had never been hit in the daytime. We went down the Berlin corridor to within, I guess, 40 miles of Berlin, and then we turned back north and hit Brunswick and Hallstatt. But they thought that we were hitting Berlin, and they had everything that would fly up that day. As I say, the weather was bad. It was snowing when we took off, and it deteriorated instead of getting any better. Within about 100 miles or so of the target, there was a recall that we were supposed to go back. Well, there was about 1,400 B-17s on this raid, and about half of them answered the recall and turned back to England. About 700 planes, our commander decided, boys, we're within 100 miles of our target, let's dump our bombs before we go back. So that's what we did. The group I was with bombed the target, and the other groups turned back. And there was quite a lively air battle there. From going in from about the Zuider Zee all the way to the target, we were under attack. We had very little fighter plane cover because they couldn't get off of the ground. The weather was turned so bad, but by the time they were supposed to rendezvous with us, most of them couldn't get off of the ground. So we were in kind of a bad pickle. We'd lost half of our firepower, and they had every thing that would fly in Germany. There were hundreds of fighter planes out there, and there were about 700 bombers. So they shot down 60 of our aircraft that day. And a B-17, if you don't know about it, a B-17 has a 10-man crew. They have a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, top turret gunner, radio operator, ball turret gunner, 2 waist gunners, and a rear gunner. So we lost 600 men on that raid, but by virtue of losing 60 aircraft. My crew, I guess, was lucky. We all got out alive. 9 of us got out alive. They killed our tail gunner. What happened to us was these German twin-engine fighters were sitting just out of the range of our 50 caliber machine guns and lobbing rockets into the formation. And when they would hit a plane, of course it would fall out of formation and the fighters would finish them off, you know. We were unlucky enough to have be hit by a rocket, fell out of formation, and then the fighters pretty well chewed us to bits. We did manage to shoot down 2 German fighters in the process before we had to, our plane was on fire and we had to get out of it. We had to parachute out of it.
When you hit the ground, what happened then?
I hit the ground right in the edge of a city of about 50,000 people, Aachen, Germany, which was right on the border with Belgium. And of course there was a large contingent of German soldiers there. They had a barracks there. And of course they watched the fight as it progressed. To make a long story short, by the time I hit the ground, why, these soldiers were there to grab us by the time we hit the ground. They were waiting for it.
Did they rough you up any when you hit the ground, or were they pretty...
There were some civilians there that would have roughed us up, understandably maybe, because I guess many of them had lost friends and neighbors and relatives in bombing. But the soldiers kept them off of us and took us to a gathering point. They gathered up a truckload of us, and then they took us to a radio station, or to a railway station, put us on a train and sent us to Frankfurt to an interrogation center. There was no, I guess the cells were about 6 by 8 or something like that. No light at all. No windows. You didn't know whether it was daylight or dark. However, there must have been a church cathedral right across near us, because we could hear the clock strike, but when it struck 12, we didn't know whether it was midnight or high noon. And they gave us, during that 10, 12 days, they gave us 2 slices of brown bread and a cup of something they call coffee, which was chicory or something. And that was the meal for the day. That was what we got for a day's ration.
Where did they take you after you left there?
After we left there, we went to Stalag 17B at Krems, Austria. They loaded us into boxcars and unloaded us at a town named Krems, which was the 2nd largest city in Austria. It was right on the Danube River, and Stalag 17B was right above it in the Alps. We could see the city, and we could see the Danube River, of course, right below us.
And by then, had they separate the officers and the enlisted men?
Yes. Only the enlisted men were sent to 17B. The officers, they had different quarters for officers. They called most of them, I think, gulags. But anyway, they were separated. We never saw our officers again, but of course all of the enlisted crew. The pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and bombardier were officers. In our case, they were lieutenants, and most of the rest of us were either staff sergeants or buck sergeants.
When you got there, what was the conditions like there, Mr. Donald?
Well, it was in the middle of the winter, and it was dark when we got to the compound. And of course the streets were muddy and snowy, and when we got to the barracks we were assigned to, there was no heat. There was a stove there, but they'd forgotten to give the boys any wood or coal to put in there to make heat. So that was pretty well the situation. We burned the porches, we burned the shutters, and after we burned all them, we just put on every bit of clothing we had, get in our bunks, and put the blanket we had over us, and we made out.
Did they pretty much adhere to the Geneva Convention?
I think, to give them credit, I believe that they fairly well tried to. Now, they didn't give us enough to eat, but perhaps that wasn't their fault. We soon gained such our superiority that they couldn't move things. You see a boxcar load up and start down the railroad track. There was a big marshalling yard there at Crimm's that we could see. And when they'd get a train, a locomotive loaded up and started down the track, usually it wasn't very many minutes till there'd be a P-51, a P-38, a P-47 blasting it off of the rails. So they did not give us much to eat. I weighed 220 when I was shot down. 15 months later, when I was liberated, I weighed 140. Well, I'd lost 80 pounds in that. They would give us brown bread, a couple of slices a day. Once in a while, they'd give us a little meat, and they would give us something they called soup. They called it rutabaga soup, but it was mostly water and no nourishing power in it at all. But we did get what kept us going. We did get a Red Cross parcel, which had, I believe, 5 pounds of food in it. About once every 2 or 3 weeks we'd get one of those, and that kept us going.
And we see in different movies they show the Red Cross man coming in. So that was pretty normal that he
Oh yeah, they would, when they when they knew the Red Cross was coming, they'd spruce up, and tell us to. And they would infer to us that we shouldn't do too much bitching to the Red Cross man, or it wouldn't go well with us. So, I mean, they had eyes; they could look around and see what we had, and they knew the story without us telling them. But as far as roughing us up, hitting you, jabbing you with a bayonet, there was very little of that. The one time that I remember getting a little jab in the hind quarters with a bayonet, I guess you could say we brought it on ourselves. They would follow us out for roll call, check us. And they'd do that 3 or 4 times a day. And this time there was a big snow on there, about 6 foot of snow. We were up in the Alps, way up in there was about 6 foot of snow, and they'd already followed us out 2 or 3 times for roll call that day. And when they came in the last time, just before dark, our barracks chief, which was a fiery little Texan named Randall, he told them to stick it. We weren't going out anymore. Well, in about 30 minutes, we heard this racket outside. and these trucks started pulling up, SS troopers with fixed bayonets and their little bonnets on, came in there, and needless to say, we got out for that last roll call, and I guess some of us went out places there wasn't any doors or windows.
You know, we see these movies all the time, and they show escapes. Was there a lot of escapes attempted, tunnels, and different things like that?
We had an escape committee, and we were forever digging tunnels until they found them, you know. There was during the time I was there was no big break out of Stalag 17B. In fact, that was one of the Commandant's brags, that a prisoner had never escaped from 17B. But we did, until the invasion, we did have committees and we did dig tunnels and so forth. But after the invasion took hold and they got a beachhead, they put out the word that for us to stay where we were, not to get out, not to try to escape and get out in the countryside. So after the invasion, we made no attempts to escape.
Okay, you said they put the word out. How did you receive the word?
Well, you know, there was about 5,500 American airmen in Stalag 17B where I was, and every 10th man was a trained radio technician. The radio operator was also a radio technician. So we just built our sets, and all we had to do was buy a crystal, and any of the guards would bring us in a crystal for a pack or two of cigarettes, you know. So we had several sets, crystal sets, that they listened in on BBC, and we even had twice a day, morning and night, we would station a guard at the door to warn them, the guys that were bringing the news around, if a German guard was coming. And in the morning and before we went to bed at night, there was a man come around and read the news, the latest news that he'd heard on BBC that day. So we pretty well knew what was going on, where the different troops were. And at the end, on Easter Sunday of 1945, they fell us out of the barracks, and they said this is for the last time. They had these machine guns set up, and we thought, we didn't know what that last time meant really, but what it turned out to be was that they didn't want the Russians were coming up from the south and the east, and they didn't want to fall into Russian hands. What they did was split us up into groups of about 5,000 men each, and there was about 20,000 men of all nationalities at Stalag 17B. They split us up into groups of about 5,000 and started marching us west. And we marched west for about 6 weeks. And we would sleep wherever night caught us. Sometimes we were lucky and we'd sleep in a barn. Other times we'd just sleep out on the ground. And if it was a farm, the Germans would run the family out and take over the house and give us the barn to sleep in. But far more frequently we just slept on the ground wherever darkness caught us.
How was the food then? Did they feed you pretty good, or was it still bad?
Still bad. They give us a little bit of brown bread and a little bit of meat now and then. But we could. They did one thing. They would loosen up enough to let us trade with the farmers. We could get a few eggs, a few potatoes, and that sort of thing to supplement our non-existent diet.
Could you and the Germans kind of sense that the war was turning in favor of the Allies?
Oh yeah. We knew that it was just a matter of time. We closed the Germans out when the invasion was successful. We knew it was just a matter of how long it was going to take the boys to get across where we were. And we were put in the woods at a little German town named Innsbruck. By the way, they've had 2 winter Olympics in Innsbruck, a beautiful little town, since I was there. And they just put us in these big woods, and supposedly the guards were supposed to look after us, but we did whatever in the heck we wanted, they didn't interfere with whatever we wanted to do. And I think they were almost as glad as we were to see the Americans roll into Innsbruck and take us over.
Okay, how did you feel when you saw the Americans coming in?
Oh, I felt on top of the world. I remember the first infantryman that came up to the woods where we were was a big, tall, slightly stooped Georgian. And I told him, I said, if you might not take it wrong, I feel like kissing you, buddy. Our words to that effect. We were overjoyed, and that's putting it mildly.
Okay. And do you remember what unit really come to?
It was a unit of the 3rd Armored Division.
Which was Patton's, right?
Huh?
Was that Patton's?
I believe that was Patton's Army, yeah.
They probably fed y'all real good that night, didn't they?
Yeah, well, no. For about a week, they would only let us eat soft food or drink, custard mostly. Yeah. And when they sent us to Camp Lucky Strike to get ready to come back home, they had these big kettles all over the place with dippers where you could just go up there and anytime you felt like it, and it was kind of like eggnog, and that was our main diet for the first 5 or 6 days. They said that we would get terribly sick if we started right in eating food.
So you had to build your system back there.
Had to build up to it.
Then you went to Camp Lucky Strike. How long were you there?
I was there about 2 weeks before we were shipped back to the States.
Did you get to get a letter home, tell your family that you were all right then, or?
Yes. I wrote several letters. I believe, if I recall correctly, they would let us write to family once a month.
Okay.
However, unfortunately, my family didn't find out that I was still alive. They knew the War Department had notified them I was missing in action, but they didn't actually know I was alive until about 6 months later. I finally got a letter through to them. And of course, my father was overjoyed. He and I were always very, very close. He was a doctor and the health officer of Wolf and Morgan County at that time.
Do you, how did y'all entertain yourselves while you were?
Well, we had a library, a small library with a lot of English authors. There were other books, but it was mainly English authors. And I was a mystery. I loved mystery books and action books. And I got to reading a mystery writer over there named Edgar A. Wallace. And I really fell in love with the guy. I loved his books. And years after I'd come home, I tried to get, I'd call these books places and try to get his books, and I finally wound up getting one of them. I would have bought the whole set. I'd love to have reread them. We did have school there. I mean, they had different types of school. And of course on Sunday we had a religious service. But besides the books, they permitted us to play baseball. We got baseball equipment through the Red Cross. And basketball. They would allow them to send us basketball. We only had the nets and the ball. We had to furnish our own uniforms, but that was fine. We were willing to do that.
Did you kind of make a league or anything?
Yeah, we had regular leagues and standings, and but to tell you how unreasonable and how ignorant, the commandant, we were having an all-star baseball game, the North against the South, and the commandant came out. He was a major, I believe. He came out to watch it, and he was sitting down on the third baseline, and one of the left-hand batters hit a ball that hit him, struck him. Well, he, I guess, thought we were doing it on purpose. We could guide the ball into him. I don't know. But he took a tantrum, stopped the game, took all of our equipment, and he wouldn't even let us play baseball for a couple of months.
He just didn't know the game, did he?
No. But they had awful tempers, and they did things that they wouldn't have countenanced in our army. I've seen a major. I saw a major there one day. He was talking to this soldier who was a PFC or something, and he kept telling him something in German. Of course, I couldn't understand what they were telling him. But I understood it when that major come out of his chair and knocked that PFC all the way across the damn room, you know. Of course, you don't see that sort of thing in American Army.
Did they kind of torture you, question you or anything much? Or?
After that 10 or 12 day interrogation at Frankfurt, no. After we got to Stalag 17B, I was never questioned again, except, about the war or my unit or that sort of thing. The Gestapo would come in and tear our barracks up. They were looking for radio sets and arms, knives, pistols. They were we could tell that even the German army rank were afraid of those doggone people, those Gestapos. Evidently their word was law wherever they were,
Can you remember when you hid your radio so they couldn't find it?
They never did find our radio, the one we had in our barracks. One of the boys had the job of keeping it hidden, and he did a doggone good job because they'd tear that place apart and not find it.
So what, you guys only had one guy so that if something happened to him or whatever?
responsible for seeing that it was put away and produced when it came time for the news, to listen to the news, yeah.
After you left Camp Lucky Strike, where did you go?
I went to, I can't remember the name of the hotel, but the first thing they did when we got in the States was to send us for a little recreation, and they had taken over the luxury hotels. They sent us to Miami Beach and put us up. We were first class. We stayed there for about 10 days, 2 weeks. And after that, I was sent to Indiana at Seymour. There was a little Air Force base there at Seymour. The name of it escapes me, but that's where I was discharged from. I was, you know, they were discharging them on a point system, and I was there until November. I was discharged early in November of 1945.
Then where did you go after that?
I went to Canton, Kentucky. I went home just as fast as I could get there.
You want to get home and get some of Mama's cooking, wasn't it?
Right. I remember one little incident. As we were picking up, getting our discharges, where you went out the door, they had a table to re-enlist, where you could re-enlist. This guy said, "You're not interested in re-enlisting, are you?" And I said, "Not unless you've got a vacancy that carries at least the general's bars. I'm not interested." But I went right back to home and started back in school. And in '48, I got my law degree.
Did you use the GI Bill while you were in school?
Huh?
Did you use the GI Bill?
I certainly did. The GI Bill was a big help to me. I guess it was to thousands of boys. I have talked to boys that said they never would have been able to have gotten a college education had it not been for the GI Bill.
Did you make many close friendships while you were in the service?
Yes, several. My friend that I went in with, I went to basic training with and went to radio school with, of course we knew each other beforehand, but we got real close. We were together a year or so after we got in the service in the same outfits, and I became very close with him. There was another boy in my group, in fact in my squadron, named Richard Erickson. We got real close. A fellow named Charles Schrag from Ohio, and a Robinson boy, all these fellows I still contact. You know, I'm still in contact with. And Robinson lived in Broken Bow, Nebraska. That's where he lives. I had a letter from him about a week ago.
Y'all have any reunions?
Yes, we have. We had, when we were younger, we had a reunion every year. I haven't been to one in 4 or 5 years, and they don't have them as often as they used to because all the boys are in their 80s. Some of them crowd 90 now, and we're just not able to travel around over the country. They would hold them might hold this one at Seattle, Washington, and the next one at Clearwater, Florida. And we just not able to. In fact, none of the boys that I know am in close contact with try to make long trips anymore.
You talked about a humorous thing a while ago. Did you guys get to play many practical jokes while you were?
Yeah, we played practical jokes on the Germans. Sometimes they had what we called a grease gun that they carried on their shoulder, and sometimes boys would do something like have one guy get the attention of the guard, and another one would get behind him and fill the barrel of his gun up with sand or things like that. Hide things from a guard, maybe get a hold of something he had and hide it. Just pranking. I guess we were, in one way, lucky in that the man who was in charge of our barracks was a school teacher in California for about 24 years. He wasn't a nationalized American. He hadn't gotten his citizenship, but he had lived on the West Coast for 25, 30 years. And he went back to Germany to visit some of his people, and they conscripted him in the army. They wouldn't let him leave to come back to the United States. They put him in a uniform. And he would kind of look out for us boys. When he thought we were bruising for a cruising, he'd say, "Now boys, you better slow down. I wouldn't do that." And that sort of thing. He kind of tried to look out for us and keep us from getting in too deep.
But the practical jokes were probably what pretty much kept you going through the days, weren't they?
Oh yeah. Of course, we'd play jokes on each other and pranks, and there was such a diversity. The boys were from all over the country, For instance, in the barracks I was in, there was a boy named Cherry that had played football on Alonzo Stagg's last team. There was boys there was a cowboy who was from New Mexico, and he'd been a cowboy all of his life up to then. He was a little older than most of us, and he would tell us about the highlight of his career was that he had worked on the King Ranch in Texas, which was the largest ranch in the world. And you met all different kinds of people, and people from all different cultures, and but I guess war is a great leveler. The guy that was a millionaire or maybe a famous personality was in the same shape that I was, who had nothing.
We talked earlier about some of the movies that they have made about prisoner of war during World War II, and you said you've seen them. Did they pretty portray?
I have seen some of them.
Are they pretty close to what?
Well, for instance, Stalag 17, I've seen that several times. It fairly depicted the buildings, what was inside the buildings, and of course this idea that like in Hogan's Heroes, that where he more or less organized and led a demolition crew of POWs. That's far out. But we did aggravate them as much as we could safely, because we figured that was part of our job. And well, of course, our Army and Air Force knew where all these camps were located, For instance, the B-17s bombed Krems twice while I was there. And Krems was right down below us on the Danube River. And the reason we knew that they knew where we were, they would always bomb away from us instead of toward us. When they swung over our camp and leveled out to go to Krems, they'd have their bomb bay doors open, but they knew where we were, and we were in no danger from them. And that would excite the guards, and they would threaten. That was one time they would threaten us when we'd get out and cheer the boys as they went over to bomb. I guess some of the guards had people. Maybe they lived in that town. I don't know. But they would, once in a while, they would threaten us when we'd get out in the yard and cheer the boys as they was dumping their bombs on Krems.
Kind of mad because you all was happy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel about war now that your military experience? Did it influence your?
I agree with. I think it was Sherman that said war is hell. General Sherman. And in general, I think there ought to be other ways to settle our disputes. However, I'm not a pacifist, and I think if we have a just cause, we have to stand up for our rights, and there's no more clear justification for a war, in my opinion, than there was World War II. We had a maniac named Hitler that had already conquered the whole European continent, and he wasn't going to be satisfied until he had the world in his hand. Well, you can't stand still for that sort of thing. And about this terrorist deal that we've got going on now, I think we've got to do something. I can't see humping up in a corner and hoping, well, those fellas, I hope they don't hit New York City, or I hope they don't hit Lexington. We got to do something about them. And I think the president's on the right track. I say, stay after them till you get the last one of them.
After you,
they're not human. I mean, their life means nothing to them. Our life means nothing to them. And I think they should be exterminated if we can exterminate them, frankly.
what kind of work did you go into after you graduated from college?
Well, when I graduated from college, I hung up a little shingle and opened a little one-horse law office in Stanton, Kentucky. And I've been there ever since. I never could get enough money to get away.
Okay. You've held some political offices too, haven't you?
Yeah, I believe, yeah, I have. I was county judge for one term, and I believe county attorney for 8 terms.
You had some good experiences with that, right?
Met some wonderful people. That was the reason I was in Powell County to begin with, that I started practicing there instead of Wolfe County, which was my native county. I I liked the people, and I thought that if I ever had any children, it would be a better place to raise them than where I was raised.
And you got married, and how many children did you have?
I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren.
Have any of them went into the military?
Huh?
Have any of your children or grandchildren gone into the military?
No. No, my grandchildren, the girl is 20 years old and the boy is just 10. My son has not served in service at all.
How long have you been married?
Since 1947. I guess that was 56 years. June the 6th. I don't have any trouble remembering my anniversary because we got married on D-Day.
Oh, you did?
June 6th.
Okay. Where was she from?
She was originally from Estill County, Irvin, but she was living in Hazel Green, Kentucky, Wolfe County when I met her.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Well, I would just observe that we came along in a generation that went through the Great Depression, World War II, which Tom Brokaw has called the greatest generation. I don't know that I would go that far, but I would say it was a good generation because they looked at things in a reasonable sort of way. They knew what had to be done and they did it. And of course we all know that the United States of America was never the same after World War II and the boys started coming back. It's been a much better, in my opinion, been a much better America because of their efforts. And only the Lord knows whether there would even have been a free United States were it not for the effort of the boys during World War II. And I would like to say this. I feel that the people at home, the people who raised the food, the people who worked in the munitions factories, who made the planes, made the bombs, made the tanks, contributed just as much to our final victory in World War II as did the boys, the 16,000 boys, 16 million boys and girls that were in uniform and went away to defend the country.
Well, John, we sure thank you for your time sharing this thing, and we thank you for being an American hero, and thank you for serving your country.
I'm not a hero. I'm just a fellow that tried to do the job that was before us to do, and I don't feel like that. I feel like I was just doing my job or trying to do it the best could. And if there was any heroes, there were 16 million of them.
You're one of those then.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.